The neon lights of Nexus Prime cast strange shadows across the metal walls. The massive space station spun slowly around a dying star, its corridors filled with aliens from every corner of the galaxy. In the deepest level of the station, where the air smelled of oil and fear, something moved through the darkness. ZEK single quotes tar. The Voidbringer stood 8 feet tall in the shadows. His black armor was not made of metal or cloth. It grew from his skin like the shell of a giant insect. His species, the Cytherians, had evolved this natural protection over millions of years. The armor was harder than steel and could turn invisible when needed. For 300 years, Zektar had been the galaxy's most feared killer. No one had ever survived when he came for them. Not the warlords of the Centauri system. Not the crime bosses of the Outer Rim. Not even the protected leaders of the core worlds. When someone wanted a person dead, they called for Zektar. Today, he had received a new contract. The message had come through the usual channels. A small data crystal, left in a secret location. No names, no faces, just credits and a target. Zektar picked up the crystal with one of his 4 arms. His fingers ended in sharp points that could cut through most materials. He inserted the crystal into his neural interface. Information flowed directly into his brain. A target's name appeared in his mind. Director Kane Williams, human, male, age 42. Location, Terran Embassy, Nexus Prime, level 847. Zektar paused. He had heard of humans before. They were the new species that had joined the galactic community just 5 years ago. Most aliens thought they were weak and primitive. They had no natural armor, no claws, no poison, no telepathy. They seemed to have no special abilities at all. The payment for this job was unusually high. 20 million galactic credits. That was enough to buy a small planet. Zektar wondered why someone would pay so much to kill one weak human. But he did not think about it for long. Cytherians were taught not to ask questions. They were taught to complete their tasks with perfect efficiency. The file contained basic information about the target. Kane Williams worked as a diplomat at the Terran Embassy. He had been on Nexus Prime for 2 years. He had no military record listed. No special training. No bodyguards beyond standard embassy security. Zektar's mandibles clicked together in what might have been satisfaction. This would be an easy job. Humans were soft and slow. They could not see in the dark like a Cytherian. They could not hear high-frequency sounds. They could not smell fear from across a room. He began to study the embassy's layout. The Terran Embassy was on the upper levels of the station, in the diplomatic quarter. It had standard security systems and a small guard force. Nothing that would challenge someone with Zektar's abilities. The assassin gathered his equipment. He needed very little. His natural abilities were usually enough. But for this job, he took a molecular blade that could cut through any material. He also took a small device that could disable electronic systems. Meanwhile, 700 levels above, Kane Williams sat in his office reading reports. The human looked ordinary in every way. He had brown hair that was starting to turn gray. He wore a simple black suit that made him look like any other diplomat. His office was small and neat with a view of the star outside. Kane was working on a trade agreement between Earth and the Rigel system. The deal would give humans access to advanced medical technology. In return, Earth would provide food crops that grew better than anything the Rigel people could produce. It was important work that could save millions of lives. He did not know that death was coming for him. Ambassador Lessa Johnson knocked on his door. She was a tall woman with short blonde hair and sharp green eyes. She had been Kane's boss for the past 2 years. She was smart and tough, qualities that served her well in the dangerous world of galactic politics. "Kane, we need to talk about The Rigel negotiations, she said as she entered his office. Kane looked up from his papers. The medical technology transfer? The Coalition is not happy about it, Lisa said. She sat down across from his desk. They think we're getting too much influence too quickly. The Coalition was a group of older alien species that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They did not like that humans were making friends with other species so fast. They preferred to keep the newcomers weak and dependent. Let them complain, Kane said. We're not breaking any laws. We're just making fair trades. Lisa frowned. It's not that simple. The Coalition has ways of making problems disappear. Khan understood what she meant. The Coalition was known to use assassins and saboteurs to handle difficult situations, but he was not worried. The embassy had good security, and he had dealt with dangerous people before, though he had never told Lisa about his past. I'll be careful, Kane said. You better be, Lisa replied. I've heard rumors that something is being planned. After Lisa left, Kane returned to his work, but part of his mind was now alert. He had learned long ago to trust his instincts. And right now, something felt wrong. Deep in the station's lower levels, Zektar was making his final preparations. He had studied the embassy's security systems and found several weaknesses. He had mapped Kane Williams' daily routine. The human left his office at the same time every day. He took the same route to his quarters. He had dinner at the same restaurant 3 times a week. Humans were so predictable. They followed patterns without thinking. This made them easy to hunt. Zektar activated his camouflage. His black armor shifted and changed until he became nearly invisible. Only the faintest outline remained, like heat waves rising from hot metal. He began to move through the station's corridors. The space station was huge. It had over 1,000 levels and housed 50 million beings. Zektar moved through the crowds like a ghost. No one saw him. No one knew he was there. He reached the diplomatic corridor after 2 hours of careful travel. The area was better lit and more heavily guarded than the lower levels. Security cameras watched every corner. Armed guards patrolled the hallways. None of this mattered to Zektar. He had been trained to avoid detection since childhood. His people were natural hunters. They could move without sound and strike without warning. The assassin found a maintenance shaft that led to the embassy level. He climbed up through the narrow space, his powerful arms pulling him higher. His natural armor scraped against the metal walls but made no sound. He emerged on level 847 near the Terran embassy. The building was small compared to the embassies of older species. Humans were still new to galactic politics. They did not yet understand how to project power through architecture. Zektar began his surveillance. He watched the guards' routines. He studied the electronic systems. He noted the weak points in the embassy's defenses. After 6 hours of observation, he had everything he needed. Tomorrow, he would begin the hunt in earnest. Kane Williams would be dead within a week. The assassin had no idea that this job would be different from all the others. He had no idea that this human would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself and his purpose. For now, Zektar was confident. He had never failed a mission. He had never met a target he could not kill. Humans were weak and primitive. This would be just another easy job. He was wrong about everything. The next morning, Kane Williams woke up feeling uneasy. He had learned to trust this feeling during his years as a soldier. Something was wrong, but he could not identify what it was. He went through his morning routine as usual. Shower, breakfast, review of the day's schedule. But part of his mind remained alert, scanning for threats. Old habits died hard. Dr. Alex Martinez knocked on his office door at exactly 9 o'clock. She was a young woman with dark hair and curious eyes. As the embassy xenobiologist, she studied alien life forms and how they interacted with humans. Kane, I need to show you something, she said, carrying a data pad. Kane looked up from his reports. What is it? Alex sat down and activated the pad. I've been analyzing our security sensor logs. There are some strange readings from yesterday. The display showed energy patterns from the embassy's scanning systems. Most of the readings were normal, but there were several gaps in the data, small blank spots where something should have been detected but was not. What could cause this? Kane asked. Advanced stealth technology, Alex replied. Something that can bend light and absorb sensor waves. Very expensive and very illegal on most worlds. Kane studied the patterns. The gaps moved through the station's corridors in a purposeful way. Whatever was causing them was not random. It was searching for something. How long have these readings been happening? He asked. Just since yesterday. But they're getting closer to the embassy. Kane felt his unease grow stronger. Someone was watching them. Someone with military-grade equipment and bad intentions. Captain Ron Davis entered the office without knocking. He was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands. He had been a Marine before taking the job as embassy security chief. He looked worried. We have a problem, Ron said. I've been checking with my contacts on the station. Word is that someone put out a contract on one of our people. Kane and Alex exchanged glances. Who's the target? Kane asked. You, Ron said simply. Kane was not surprised. He had made enemies during his time as a diplomat. The trade deals he negotiated often hurt the profits of powerful people. But he had not expected them to hire an assassin. Any idea who took the contract? Kane asked. Ron shook his head. No one's talking. But the price is high. 20 million credits. That kind of money brings out the best killers in the galaxy. Alex looked at her datapad again. The stealth signatures match Cytherian technology. Do you think it could be one of them? Kane had heard of the Cytherians. They were the galaxy's most feared assassins. They had been killing for credits for centuries. No one had ever survived when they came calling. If it's a Cytherian, we're in serious trouble, Ron said. They're not like other killers. They're more like hunting machines. Kane stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the normal life of the station continuing. People went about their business, unaware that a predator was among them. What do you recommend? Kane asked. Ron activated a security display. I can increase patrols, add more guards, install better sensors. But honestly, if a Cytherian wants you dead, there's not much I can do to stop it. Kane turned back to his colleagues. Then we need to think differently. What do we know about Cytherian psychology? Alex pulled up files on her pad. They're emotionally suppressed. They don't feel fear, anger, or sympathy. They're trained from birth to be perfect killers. They follow orders without question. What about their culture? Kane asked. They don't really have one. Their society is based on efficiency and obedience. They don't create art or music. They don't have families in the way we understand them. They exist to kill. Kane absorbed this information. He had dealt with many different types of enemies during his military career. But this was something new. How did you fight someone who had no emotions, no desires, no weaknesses? There has to be something, he said. Everyone has vulnerabilities. Ron shook his head. Not Cytherians. That's why they're so effective. It can't be bribed, threatened, or reasoned with. They just complete their missions. Kane disagreed, but he did not say so. In his experience, everyone had vulnerabilities. The trick was finding them. That evening, Kane changed his routine. Instead of going to his usual restaurant, he went to a different one on the opposite side of the station. He took a roundabout route, doubling back several times to see if he was being followed. He was. Kane could not see his pursuer, but he could feel the presence. It was like a cold shadow that stayed just out of sight. The assassin was skilled, but Kane had been trained in counter-surveillance. He knew when he was being watched. Instead of being afraid, Kane felt a strange excitement. This was the kind of challenge he had not faced in years. His diplomatic work was important, but it was not dangerous in the same way. This felt like the old days. He led his invisible pursuer through the station's maze of corridors. He wanted to learn about his enemy's methods. How did the Catherian move? What patterns did it follow? What were its preferences? After 2 hours of careful observation, Kane had learned several things. The assassin was patient and methodical. It did not take unnecessary risks. It stayed in the shadows and avoided crowded areas. It was professional in every way. But Kane noticed something else. The assassin seemed curious about human behavior. Several times, Kane had done something unexpected, and he could sense the creature's attention sharpening. It was studying him just as much as he was studying it. This gave Kane an idea. The next day, he began to act differently. He took new routes to work. He ate at different restaurants. He struck up conversations with strangers. He was not trying to escape his pursuer. He was trying to confuse it. Catherians were trained to predict their target's behavior. They used patterns to plan their attacks. But Kane was deliberately breaking every pattern he could think of. More importantly, he was showing the assassin things about human nature that it had probably never seen before. Humans were social creatures. They were curious about other species. They were adaptable and unpredictable. Dr. Martinez continued to monitor the sensor readings. The stealth signatures were getting stronger and more frequent. Their watcher was becoming bolder. It's learning our routines, she told Kane. But it's also spending more time just observing, like it's studying us. Kane nodded. This confirmed his suspicions. The assassin was not just planning an attack. It was trying to understand its prey. Captain Davis was not happy with Kane's new behavior. "You're taking unnecessary risks," he said. "If you keep wandering around the station, you're going to give this thing the perfect opportunity to strike." "Maybe. That's what I want," Kane replied. Ron stared at him. "Are you insane? This is a Catherian assassin we're talking about. It's not some street thug you can outsmart." Kane smiled. "Every enemy can be defeated. You just have to find the right approach." That night, Kane made his most daring move yet. He left the embassy alone and walked to the station's observation deck. It was a public area with large windows that looked out at the stars. There were plenty of people around, but also plenty of places for an assassin to hide. Kane stood at the window and waited. He knew the assassin was watching. He could feel those alien eyes studying his every move. After an hour, Kane began to speak. He did not speak loudly or look around. He just talked to the stars as if he were alone. "I know you're there," he said, quietly. "I know you're watching me. I know you're going to try to kill me." He paused and looked at his reflection in the window. "But I'm curious about you. What's it like to be a perfect killer? Do you ever wonder about the people you hunt? Do you ever ask yourself why you do what you do?" Kane waited for a response, but none came. He had not expected one, but he hoped his words would plant a seed of doubt in the assassin's mind. "I'm not going to run," Kane continued. "I'm not going to hide. If you want to kill me, you're going to have to face me. But when you do, I want you to answer a question for me." He turned away from the window and walked back toward the embassy. As he left, he spoke one last time. "The question is this: are you killing me because you choose to, or because someone else chose for you?" Kane did not know if the assassin had heard him, but he hoped the words would make the creature think, because thinking was the first step toward doubt. And doubt was the beginning of change. In the shadows, Zektar watched the human leave. 4. The first time in his long life, he felt something he did not understand. The human's words had created a strange sensation in his mind. Questions. The human had asked him questions. No target had ever done that before. Zektar tried to push the feeling away. He was a Catherian. He did not ask questions. He completed missions. But the human's words echoed in his mind. Choice. The human had spoken of choice. What did that mean? 4. The first time in 300 years, Zektar the Voidbringer was confused. Zektar had not slept for 3 days. Catherians did not need as much rest as other species, but they still needed some. However, every time he tried to enter the meditative state that served as sleep for his kind, the human's words came back to him. Are you killing me because you choose to, or because someone else chose for you? The question made no sense. Catherians did not choose. They were given tasks, and they completed them. Choice was inefficient. Choice led to mistakes and hesitation. Choice was weakness, but the human had spoken of choice as if it were important, as if it were something valuable. Zektar tried to focus on his mission. He had spent 4 days studying Kane Williams' new patterns. The human had become unpredictable, but Zektar was patient. Eventually, every target made a mistake that allowed him to strike. The assassin had identified several opportunities. Kane sometimes walked alone through quiet corridors. He ate at restaurants with poor security. He spent time in the observation deck where sightlines were limited, but something held Zektar back. Each time he prepared to strike, he remembered the human's words. And each time he found himself wanting to hear more. This was wrong. This was not how Catherians behaved. Zektar had been trained since childhood to eliminate such thoughts. Curiosity was dangerous. Interest in targets was forbidden. Yet he could not stop himself from wondering about the human. On the 5th day, Zektar made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of attacking, he would confront the human directly. He would ask his own questions and put an end to this strange confusion. Kane Williams was in his office late that night, working on trade agreements. The embassy was quiet except for the night security guards. It was the perfect time for an assassination. Zektar disabled the security systems with his electronic device. He moved through the corridors like a shadow, his camouflage making him nearly invisible. The guards never knew he was there. He reached Kane's office and stood outside the door. Through the window, he could see the human working at his desk. Kane looked tired but focused. He seemed completely unaware of the danger approaching. Zektar could have killed him easily. One quick strike with his molecular blade would end the mission. But instead, he deactivated his camouflage and knocked on the door. Kane looked up, surprised. Come in. Zektar entered the office. In the bright light, he looked even more imposing. His black armor gleamed like polished stone. His 4 arms moved with fluid grace. His face was hidden behind a mask that showed only glowing red eyes. Kane did not run. He did not scream. He did not even look afraid. Instead, he smiled. You must be Zektar the Voidbringer, Kane said calmly. I was wondering when you'd introduce yourself. The assassin stopped in the middle of the room. This was not the reaction he had expected. Targets were supposed to be afraid. They were supposed to beg for their lives or try to escape. You know who I am? Zektar asked. His voice was deep and mechanical, filtered through his mask. I know. Your reputation, Kane replied. 300 years of perfect kills. No failed missions, no survivors. Very impressive. Kane gestured to a chair. Please, sit down. We should talk. Zektar stared at the human. You want to talk? I am here too. Kill you. I know, Kane said. But you haven't done it yet. You've had plenty of opportunities over the past few days. So I'm curious about why you're here now. talking instead of killing. The assassin did not sit down. You asked me a question. I want an answer. Kane leaned back in his chair. Which? Question? About choice, Zektar said. You asked if I was killing you because I choose to, or because someone else chose for me. And what do you think the answer is? Zektar was quiet for a long moment. I do not understand the question. Cytherians do not choose. We are given tasks. We complete them. Kane nodded. So someone else chose for you. Someone paid 20 million credits to have me killed, and you accepted the job. Yes, but you're here talking to me instead of killing. Me. Isn't that a choice? Zektar felt that strange sensation in his mind again. The human's words created patterns of thought that he had never experienced before. I am ... gathering information, he said finally. Kane smiled. You're curious. That's very human of you. I am not human. I am Cytherian. We do not experience curiosity. Yet here you are, asking questions instead of completing your mission. Zektar raised his molecular blade. The weapon hummed with deadly energy. I can complete my mission at any time. Kane did not flinch. Of course you can, but you won't. Not yet. How do you know? Because if you were going to kill me, you would have done it already. You're here because you want to understand something. You want to know why I'm not afraid. Zektar lowered his weapon slightly. Why are you not afraid? Kane stood up and walked to the window. Because I've been where you are. I've been a weapon for other people to use. I've killed because I was told to kill, not because I wanted to. You are a killer? Zektar asked. I was a soldier. For 15 years, I followed orders without question. I killed enemies I had never met, for reasons I didn't always understand. I was very good at it. The assassin moved closer. What changed? Kane turned back to face him. I started asking questions, just like you're doing now. I wanted to know why I was fighting, who I was really serving, what kind of person I was becoming. And what did you learn? I learned that I had a choice. I could continue being a weapon, or I could become something else. I chose to become something else. Zektar tilted his head. What did you become? A diplomat. Someone who solves problems with words instead of violence. Someone who builds bridges instead of burning them down. But you still kill when necessary. Zektar observed. Kane was quiet for a moment. If I have to, but I choose when and why. That's the difference. The assassin walked around the office, studying the human's possessions. There were books on the shelves, photos on the desk, plants growing in pots. It was so different from the sterile efficiency of Cytherian spaces. Tell me about choice, Zektar said. Kane sat back down. Choice is freedom. It's the ability to decide your own path, to determine your own purpose. Choice is inefficient, Zektar replied. It leads to mistakes and confusion. Sometimes, Kane agreed, but it also leads to growth, to discovery, to the possibility of becoming something better than what you were. Zektar stopped walking and looked directly at the human. Better than what I was? You're a perfect killer, Zektar. But is that all you want to be? The question hit the assassin like a physical blow. He had never considered wanting to be anything other than what he was. Cytherians were taught that they were already perfect. I do not know, he said finally. Kane smiled. That's the beginning of wisdom. Not knowing, but wanting to find out. My people would say I am broken, Zektar said. They would say these thoughts are a disease. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe these thoughts are what make you alive instead of just existing. Zektar sat down heavily in the chair. For the first time in his life, he felt tired. Not physically tired, but mentally exhausted from thinking about concepts that had no place in his ordered world. I came here to kill you, he said. I know. I still might. Kane nodded. That's your choice to make. But if I do not kill you, what happens then? Then you'll have to decide what you want to do instead. Zektar looked at his hands. They were designed for killing. His whole body was a weapon. I do not know how to be anything else. Learning is part of the process. Kane sighed. No one is born knowing how to be human. We all have to figure it out as we go. Even you? Kane laughed. Especially me. I'm still learning every day. The assassin stood up. I must think about this. Of course, but Zektar? When you think about it, remember that you have value beyond your ability to kill. You have a mind capable of asking questions. You have the capacity to grow and change. Those are gifts that shouldn't be wasted. Zektar activated his camouflage and began to fade from view. I will return. I'll be here, Kane said. After the assassin left, Kane sat alone in his office. He had taken a huge risk. By showing mercy and understanding to a killer, he might have signed his own death warrant. But he had also seen something in Zektar's behavior that gave him hope. Voidbringer was beginning to doubt. And doubt was the first crack in the wall of certainty that had defined his existence. Kane just hoped that crack would grow into something transformative instead of something destructive. In the shadows at the station, Zektar moved through the corridors like a ghost, but inside his mind, a war was raging. Everything he had been taught told him to complete his mission, but everything he had learned tonight told him there might be another way. For the first time in 300 years, Zektar the Voidbringer was afraid, not of death or failure, but of the possibility that everything he had believed about himself might be wrong, and in that fear, something new was beginning to grow, something that might have been hope. Zektar had not returned to his hiding place in the lower levels of the station. Instead, he wandered the corridors like a lost soul, his camouflage keeping him invisible to the thousands of beings he passed. For the first time in his existence, he was experiencing something beyond the cold efficiency of his training. The human's words had awakened something in his mind that he could not name or understand. He found himself in the station's library, a vast space filled with knowledge from across the galaxy. Catherians had no use for books or learning beyond what was necessary for killing. But now, Zektar felt drawn to the information around him. He accessed a public terminal and began to search for information about choice, about freedom, about what it meant to change one's purpose in life. The concepts were alien to him, but they pulled at his consciousness like gravity. Meanwhile, Kane Williams was having his own struggles. Dr. Martinez had detected the security breach in the embassy's systems. She knew someone had been inside Kane's office, though the sensors had not recorded who. The stealth signatures were stronger than ever, she told Kane over breakfast. Whatever was in your office last night, it wanted to be detected this time. Kane sipped his coffee and nodded. It was our assassin friend. Alex nearly choked on her food. The Catherian was in your office? Are you insane? Why didn't you call security? Because we had a conversation instead. Captain Davis joined them at the table, looking grim. My sources tell me the contract is still active. 20 million credits is a lot of money. If this Catherian doesn't finish the job soon, someone else will? Kane had been thinking about this too. Then we need to resolve this quickly, one way or another. What do you mean? Alex asked. I mean, I need to help our friend make a decision. He's at a crossroads, and he doesn't know which path to take. Davis shook his head. You're talking about a Catherian assassin like it's some confused teenager. These creatures don't change, Kane. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the alien plants sway in the artificial breeze. Finally, Zektar spoke again. Tell me about your first choice, he said. Kane thought back to that day years ago. I was ordered to eliminate a group of rebels on a distant planet. When I got there, I discovered they weren't rebels at all. They were families trying to protect their children from a corrupt government. But you had orders. Yes, and for the first time in my life, I decided my orders were wrong. I helped the families escape instead of killing them. What happened then? I was court-martialed, stripped of rank, dishonorably discharged. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. Zektar processed this information. You gave up everything for strangers. I gave up everything for the chance to become someone I could respect. The assassin stood up and walked to the fountain. He watched the water flow in patterns that seemed random, but followed hidden rules. I have never respected myself, he said quietly. Kane joined him by the water. Why not? Because I have never done anything worthy of respect. I have only followed orders and killed targets. I have never created anything. I have never helped anyone. I have never made the galaxy better. You could start now. Zektar turned to face him. How? By making your first real choice. Not as a Catherian assassin, but as Zektar the individual. And if I choose wrong, then you'll learn from the mistake. And choose better next time. That's what growth means. Zektar was quiet for a long time. Kane could see the internal struggle playing out behind those red eyes. 300 years of conditioning, warred with newly awakened possibilities. There is something else, Zektar said finally. Something you should know about the contract on your life. Kane listened carefully. It was not issued by a criminal organization or a business rival. It came from the coalition government itself. This was not entirely surprising to Kane. The coalition had been opposed to human expansion in the galaxy from the beginning. Which department? Internal Security, under the command of Director Steele. They want you dead because your trade negotiations are giving humans too much influence. Too quickly. Kane absorbed this information. How many others are they targeting? Unknown. But this contract was described as a test case. If successful, similar actions would be taken against other human diplomats. Now Kane understood the stakes. This was not just about him. It was about whether humans would be allowed to participate as equals in galactic civilization, or whether they would be kept weak and isolated. Thank you for telling me this, Kane said. I have not decided what to do about it yet, Zektar warned. I know. But sharing that information was a choice. A good choice. They walked back toward the garden entrance. As they prepared to part ways, Zektar spoke again. If I choose not to complete this mission, what will you do about Director Steele? Kane smiled grimly. That depends on what evidence you might be willing to provide. You would use a Catherian assassin's testimony against the coalition? I would use a friend's testimony to protect innocent people. Zektar stopped walking. Friend? That's what you are becoming, isn't it? Someone I can trust. Someone who chooses to do the right thing instead of just following orders. For the first time in his existence, Zektar experienced something he would later learn was called gratitude. This human had seen past his fearsome reputation to something worth saving. Something worth believing in. I need more time to think. Zektar said, take all the time you need. But remember, every day you spend thinking is another day you're not killing. That's growth. After Zektar disappeared into the shadows, Kane returned to his quarters. He had a lot of work to do. If the coalition was targeting human diplomats, Ambassador Johnson needed to know immediately. Security protocols would have to be updated. Other embassies would have to be warned. But more importantly, Kane had to prepare for the possibility that Zektar might choose to complete his mission after all. The assassin was changing, but change was a process, not an instant. Transformation. Kane activated his secure communication system and began composing a message to Earth. Whatever happened next, Humanity needed to know what they were facing. In his hidden lair, Zektar sat staring at the book Kane had given him. The text was in Galactic Standard, which he could read perfectly, but the concepts described were as alien to him as breathing. Underwater, the book talked about philosophers and thinkers who had questioned everything they believed. It described people who had changed the course of entire civilizations by choosing to think differently. One passage particularly caught his attention. The unexamined life is not worth living. Zektar had never examined his life. He had simply lived it according to the programming installed in his mind as a child. But now, for the first time, he was beginning to look at his existence with critical eyes. What had he accomplished in 300 years? He had ended thousands of lives, but he had never saved one. He had served the purposes of others, but he had never pursued a purpose of his own. He had been an instrument of death, but he had never been an agent of life. The realization was painful, but it was also liberating. If his past was empty, his future could be filled with meaning. If he had been a destroyer, he could choose to become something else. Zektar activated the communication device Kane had given him. For a moment, he hesitated. Using it would be another choice, another step away from everything he had been. Then he pressed the activation button and spoke. Kane Williams, I have made my decision. Don't grow or learn or become better people. They're biological machines designed to kill. Maybe, Kane said, but maybe not. Maybe they're just people who never learned there was another way to live. That evening, Kane did something unprecedented. He sent a message through the station's public information system. It was addressed to a friend who was learning to ask questions. The message was simple. If you want to continue our conversation, meet me in the botanical gardens on level 523 at midnight. Come alone, and I'll do the same. Kane had no idea if Zektar would see the message, or if he would respond. But he had to try. At exactly midnight, Kane stood alone in the botanical gardens. The space was filled with plants from dozens of worlds, creating a small oasis of life in the metal corridors of the station. Most of the lights were dimmed, creating pools of shadow where someone could hide. Kane waited for 10 minutes before Zektar materialized from the darkness. The assassin moved silently, his camouflage fading away like morning mist. You came, Kane said. I had questions, Zektar replied. They walked along the garden paths, surrounded by the strange beauty of alien flowers. Kane had brought a small bag with him, and he pulled out 2 items. The first was a book. This is about human philosophy, he said, offering it to Zektar. It talks about the nature of choice and free will. Zektar took the book with 2 of his hands. I do not understand these concepts. You will, if you want to. The important thing is that you're asking the right questions. The second item was a small device. This is a communication unit. If you want to talk more, you can reach me anytime. Zektar stared at the objects. Why are you giving me these things? Because I believe you're capable of growth. I believe you can become something more than what you are programmed to be. And if I cannot? If I decide to complete my mission? Kane looked directly into the assassin's glowing red eyes. Then that will be your choice to make. But it will be a C. Kane was in the middle of briefing Ambassador Johnson when his communication device chimed. The message was short but clear. Kane Williams, I have made my decision. What is it? Johnson asked, noticing Kane's expression. A moment that could change everything, Kane replied. He activated his response. I'm listening, Zektar. I choose not to complete the mission. I choose to help you instead. Johnson's eyes widened as she realized what she was hearing. Kane felt a surge of relief, mixed with pride. Zektar had chosen growth over programming, hope over fear. What do you need from me? Kane asked. Meet me at the same place as before. Come alone, but bring Captain Davis. We will need his expertise for what comes next. An hour later, Kane and Davis stood in the botanical gardens. Zektar materialized from the shadows, but this time his posture was different. He stood straighter, moved with more purpose. The change was subtle, but unmistakable. Captain Davis, Zektar said. Acknowledging the security chief. Davis was clearly uncomfortable being in the presence of a legendary assassin, but he maintained his composure. Zektar, I have information about the conspiracy against your people. Zektar continued. But first, I must ask something of you both. What? Kane asked. I need your help to become something other than what I am. I do not know how to exist without a mission. I do not know what purpose I can serve, if not as a killer. Kane and Davis exchanged glances. This was unprecedented. A Cytherian assassin asking for help with personal transformation. What did you have in mind? Kane asked. I want to use my skills to protect instead of destroy, to serve life instead of death, but I do not know how to begin. Davis spoke up. You could work with our security forces. Your abilities would be invaluable for protecting diplomats and civilians. Zektar considered this. Would your people trust a former assassin? They'll trust my judgment, Kane said. And you'll have to prove yourself over time. But everyone deserves a chance at redemption. Redemption, Zektar repeated the word slowly. Another concept I am learning. They sat down on the bench by the fountain. Zektar began to share what he knew about the Coalition conspiracy. Director, Steele oversees a special unit within Coalition Internal Security, he explained. Their mission is to eliminate threats to Coalition dominance. Your success as a diplomat has marked you as such a threat. How many others are targeted? Davis asked. The contract on Kane was a test. If successful, similar contracts would be issued for 5 other human diplomats across the galaxy. The goal is to cripple humanity's expansion before it becomes unstoppable. Kane felt anger building inside him. They want to murder innocent people to maintain their power. Yes, and they chose Cytherians because we are efficient and discreet. No evidence, no witnesses, no political consequences. But you're willing to testify against them? Davis asked. Zektar nodded. I have recordings of all my communications with Director Steele's agents. I have financial records showing the payment transfers. I have enough evidence to expose the entire operation. Why would you do this? Davis asked. You're basically declaring war on the most powerful government in the galaxy. Because Kane taught me that some things are more important than survival. Some principles are worth fighting for. Kane felt a deep sense of pride in his alien friend. What's the plan? Zektar pulled out a data crystal. All the evidence is here. But simply releasing it will not be enough. Steele will deny everything and claim the evidence is fabricated. We need to catch him in the act. How? By making him think his plan is working. I will report that the mission was successful, that you are dead. This will trigger him to activate the other contracts. Davis saw the flaw in the plan immediately. But if the other assassins succeed, 5 people will die. Not if we warn them first, Kane said. We contact the other targets, explain the situation, and help them prepare. And when Steele realizes what has happened, Davis asked. Zektar's eyes glowed brighter. Then he will learn what it means to be hunted by someone who chooses his own targets. They spent the next 2 hours planning the operation. It was dangerous and complex, requiring precise timing and perfect coordination. But it was their best chance to expose the conspiracy and save lives. Kane would have to fake his own death convincingly, enough to fool Coalition intelligence. The other targeted diplomats would need to be contacted and protected without alerting Steele's network. And Zektar would have to walk a tightrope, maintaining his cover while gathering final evidence. "There's one more thing," Zektar said as they prepared to leave. "I need to understand something before we begin." "What?" Kane asked. "Why did you trust me? Why did you see potential for change when my own people saw only a weapon?" Kane thought about the question carefully. "Because I recognized something in you that I had seen in myself. The capacity for growth. The desire to be more than what others expected you to be. But I could have killed you at any time." "Yes, but you didn't. And that choice told me everything I needed to know about who you really are." Zektar was quiet for a moment. "I have never had a friend before." "You do now," Kane said simply. The next day, the plan went into motion. Kane staged an accident in his quarters, using special effects technology borrowed from the embassy's entertainment systems. To outside observers, it would appear that a gas leak had caused an explosion, killing him instantly. Zektar transmitted his success report to Director Steele's agents. Within hours, he received confirmation that the other contracts were being activated. Meanwhile, Kane and Davis worked frantically to contact the other targeted diplomats. The warning messages had to be carefully crafted to avoid detection by Coalition Monitoring Systems. Ambassador Sarah Liu on Centauri Prime was the first to respond. "Are you certain about this intelligence?" she asked during their encrypted conversation. "Completely certain," Kane replied. "Our source is unimpeachable." One by one, the other diplomats confirmed receipt of the warnings. Security measures were quietly increased. Escape plans were prepared. The trap was being set. Director Steele, unaware that his network had been compromised, proceeded with confidence. The elimination of Kane Williams had been flawlessly executed. Soon, humanity's diplomatic influence would be crippled beyond recovery. But 3 days later, reports began to filter in. The assassin sent to kill Ambassador Liu had been captured by station security. The killer targeting Dr. Peterson on Rigel had been found dead in his hotel room, apparently poisoned by his own weapon. One by one, Steele's assassins failed or disappeared. His perfect plan was falling apart. In his office on Coalition Central Command, Steele realized he had been outmaneuvered. Somehow, the humans had learned of his operation. Somehow, they had turned the tables on him. His communication system chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as a former employee. Steele opened the message and found himself staring at the unmistakable form of Zektar the Voidbringer. "Director Steele," the assassin's mechanical voice said, "I am no longer in your service. I have chosen a new employer and a new purpose. Consider this my resignation." The message continued, "The evidence of your conspiracy has been transmitted to every major news organization in the galaxy. Your career is over. Your freedom is forfeit. And your life is now in the hands of someone who has learned the value of mercy. If you surrender yourself to galactic authorities within 24 hours, you will live to stand trial. If you do not, I will come for you. And this time, Director, I will be choosing my own target." Steele's hands shook as he watched the message end. The galaxy's most feared assassin had just declared war on him, and he knew there was nowhere in the universe he could hide. 18 hours later, Director Steele surrendered to galactic justice. Authority agents. He was taken into custody without resistance, preferring a lifetime in prison to being hunted by his former weapon. Kane watched the news reports from his office at the embassy. Zektar sat across from him, his camouflage deactivated, no longer hiding in shadows. "How does it feel?" Kane asked. "Strange," Zektar replied. "I have spent my life bringing fear to others. Today, I use that fear to protect the innocent. It is satisfying. You saved 5 lives today, and you've probably saved countless others by stopping Steele's operation." Zektar nodded. "I understand." Now, what you meant about choosing your own purpose. It is frightening, but it is also liberating. Kane smiled. Welcome to the rest of your life, my friend. Ambassador Johnson entered the office with a broad smile. The Coalition Council has formally apologized for Steele's actions. They're offering us expanded trade agreements and security guarantees. Good, Kane said. But the real victory is something else entirely. He looked at Zektar, who was reading the philosophy book Kane had given him. The assassin had asked for a desk in the embassy so he could continue his studies while serving as their security advisor. What's that? Johnson asked. We proved that anyone can change, that no one is beyond redemption. That choice is more powerful than programming. Johnson followed his gaze to Zektar. You really think he can adapt to a normal life? He already has, Kane said. He just doesn't realize it yet. As if hearing their conversation, Zektar looked up from his book. Kane, I have a question about this passage regarding moral philosophy. Kane walked over to help his friend with his studies. 6 months ago, Zektar had been the galaxy's M,